Hi guys, welcome to our second section for week 3. Today we're going to go over effective web design basics, and talk a little bit about your site content. Our next lecture will be Monday at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Best way to contact me, just as a reminder, is through email at misty.porch@independence.edu. You can also text message me, Skype me, or give me a call. What is interactive design? The process in which designers focus on creating an engaging web interface with logical and thought-out behaviors and actions. Successful interactive design uses technology and principles of good communication to create desired user experience. Hi, Daniel. Hi, Tamisha. Now, what do you think of when you think of an interactive website? What are your first thoughts? If someone said, hey, can you check out my interactive website? What would you think? What would you expect? Would you expect animation maybe? That would include things like maybe rolling over objects and them changing or doing something. Your buttons should definitely be animated, things like that, right? You roll over it, things change, they become different, that sort of thing. Usability is a big thing in interactive design. Usability may feel like a vague term, but it really can be simplified, because you just need to answer a simple question. Can someone easily use this? Usability includes all kinds of aspects, all kinds of things, but at its very core, it's all about whether or not that website or that app or that software is easy to use. And that is the whole goal of anything, any application, any software, any website, is that it needs to be easy to use, because if it's not easy to use, nobody's going to use it, right? We don't use things that are difficult. They're too complicated. We find something better. And that is especially true with the web, because web is convenient, right? That's why we all love it, because it's so convenient. It's fast. We get our answers and we move on. Usability can be broken down into 7 principles: learnability, flexibility, robustness, efficiency, memorability, errors, and satisfaction. How many of you have used an app on your cell phone and you get errors all the time? It freezes, stops working, closes. How long do you keep that app before you find something else? Not very long. We usually find something that works better, right? Learnability, you always need to look at how easily can a new user learn to navigate the interface. You have to think about those things when you build a website, especially when you build a website. If you've put something new on it or something like that, then you need to ask yourself, how easy is it going to be for someone that's never used this before to use it? And if it's going to be too difficult, you need to be changing it, because nobody's going to use the website. What about flexibility? How many ways can a user interact with the system? If it's too many, if your user can interact with a page a million different ways, would you say that's too much? Would that lead to confusion? It will, definitely will. If you were in my DS241 class, we talked a lot about flexibility. If you give a user too many options, they get confused. Hence the reason we've seen navigation bars shrink so much over the past 5 years. Because giving users too many options makes it difficult for them to decide what they need to do. So how about robustness? How well are we supporting users when they face errors? Websites generally don't have too many errors. Occasionally, pages don't load properly. So if your page doesn't load properly, let's say somebody pulls up your page and none of your images are loading correctly. There's something wrong with the web server that day. How do you accommodate the users? They're still going to be frustrated, yes, but how can you keep that frustration level down? What do we use in order to replace those images with text? We use those alt tags, right? It gives a description. This is what's supposed to be here. Then at least they can imagine it in their minds. Efficiency. How quickly can a user perform a task? Efficiency also applies to how fast does that web page load. If it's too slow, do you think you should do something about that? How many of you have been to a website that it took forever for the page to load? Have you guys experienced that? Going to a website and it's taking forever for it to load. Do you stay on that page and wait for it to load? Or do you go up to the top and hit the back button and find a new page? Yeah, we usually go for that new page because we don't have time to sit around and wait for a page to load. So if you've tested your website that you've built and it's loading slow, you've got a problem, don't you? What are some of the things you need to look at that will help make your page load faster? Image size, absolutely. That is usually the #1 source of a page loading slowly because the images on it are not web ready. They're huge DPIs, which makes them huge image files, and those take time to load. So the #1 thing to check if you're having trouble loading a website you've built is check your image size. Most likely, you've got some images on that page that are 300 plus DPI, and so those are megabyte files instead of gigabyte files that will load quickly. We change them to make them web ready, bring them down to no more than 75 DPI, and re-upload that page, and it's going to work 100 times faster. Memorability. If a user hasn't visited the system in a while, how well will they remember the interface? Think about programs you've used, probably in jobs you've had, and things like that. Every job usually comes with different software, different applications at some point that you're having to use. You train, you use it. Now, how many of you had a job like that, have a different job now? Could you go back to your old job and know how to use that application? Even in stores, working cash registers. All cash registers are usually a little bit different. They have a different interface. Can you remember how to use them all? Most of the time, we hold on to at least a little bit of the information. Or if we went back and opened the app and looked at it for a while, maybe played with it, we'd figure it out. Now memories would start coming back because things are memorable. But when you have a bad application or a bad website that is hard to navigate, hard to use, most likely they're never going to visit it again. But if they do, because whatever they needed is only on that website. My 401k website, is disastrous. It is complicated and to use. It's just hard to use. It's hard to navigate. The whole design is just horrible. But those are the people that have my 401k. I have to go to that website occasionally. Do you think I remember how to use it every single time? I don't. You would think because it's so complicated I would remember, but I don't go to it enough to remember, and it's complicated and they change it all the time, and so I never remember how to navigate where I need to go, so I end up having to figure it out every single time. You don't want that for your users. You want them to easily remember the website. You want it to be convenient because then they're going to use it more often, and if they use it more often, that means they're going to be purchasing the services or product that website is offering, right? Errors. How many errors do users make? How quickly can they recover from those errors? Well, how many times have you been on the website and accidentally clicked the wrong button? We've all done it, right? We've all been on a website and accidentally clicked something we didn't mean to click. Whether it be a text link that was in the paragraph we were reading and our mouse was skimming over and we accidentally hit the button and it took us out of that website somewhere else. Well, thankfully, there is a built-in usability in every web browser. We can simply go up and hit the back button, right? But how many of you have actually been on a website where that's happened and you went up to hit the back button and it didn't work? I have. It drives me, excuse me. It drives me nuts when I've accidentally done something and that back button won't work. That only happens when they have actually built in some code into that website to keep that back button from working. Usually it happens when you go accidentally click on something on that website that's not even pertinent to the website. It's some sort of third-party link. And that third party has built something into their website so that when you go there, you can't get back. It drives me bananas. Satisfaction. Do users enjoy using the interface? And are they pleased with the results? Sorry, guys. There are actually a couple of different ways that you can determine this. A, you have to kind of put yourself in the user's seat and stop being the graphic designer and be the user and determine whether it's easy or not. The other way is you create a test panel. And you can use your friends, family, coworkers, things like that, where you upload the website to something like Business Catalyst, so it's temporary. And you give everybody the web link and have them go in and play with the website. And they write down their thoughts. You ask specific questions. These things are test panels. You give them specific tasks to do. Like from the home page, find out, let's say you were on a fast food restaurant. You built a fast food restaurant website. And you've got a test panel. It's made up of your friends, family, coworkers. You're going to give them all the exact same question. Question 1 could be something like, what time is breakfast served? Well, they have to figure out on that website where they would find that information. And they tell you how long it took them to find it, where they found it, how long it took them to find it. And you ask them pointed questions like that to determine whether or not the usability of that website is good or bad. or if there's something too confusing. You always leave space for them to comment. You know, the breakfast served, the times of the restaurant were found on the contact page. That was a little odd. Took me a while to find it. Maybe it should have been on the menu page. Things like that. But inadvertently, as designers, we end up putting information in places that is not always conducive of the user, if that makes sense. It's not where they would expect it, but in our design plan, that's where it worked. That's where it looked best. So that's where we put it. It doesn't mean that's where it should go. And that's where you use things like test panels for. Friends and family are great for that type of stuff. But remember, always give them pointed questions. It can't be just check out this website, tell me how you like it. Give them pointed questions and tasks to complete so that you get an overall on how well the user experience is and the usability is. The 5 dimensions. In Bill Moggridge's book of interviews, Designing Interactions, Gillian Crampton Smith, an academic in interaction design, introduced the concept of 4 dimensions of an interaction design language. In other words, these dimensions make up the interactions themselves, and as a result, they make up the communication between a user and the screen. The 4 original dimensions are words, visual representation, physical objects or space, and time. More recently, Kevin Silver, senior interaction designer at IDEXX Laboratories, has added a 5th dimension, behavior. 1D, the first dimension is words, right? Should be simple to understand and written in such a way that they communicate information easily to the end user. The second dimension, which is visual, visual representations are all graphics or images. Essentially, everything that is not text. They should be used in moderation so as not to be overwhelming. And the third, physical objects or space refers to the physical hardware, whether it's a mouse and keyboard or a mobile device a user interacts with. And the 4th time is the length that the user spends interacting with the first 3 dimensions. It includes the way in which the user might measure progress as well as sound and animation. And the 5th, behavior, was added by Kevin Silver in his article, What Puts the Design in Interaction Design. It is the emotions and reactions that the user has when interacting with the system. Using these 5 dimensions, an interaction designer can pay attention to the very experience that user has when communicating and connecting with a system. So what makes a website successful? Well, how the user perceives it, right? Because it's not about what the company thinks about it. It's not about what you think about it. It's not how great the design is. It's all about what the user thinks about it, right? And whether they like it and they think it's good and easy to use. And they're going to be wondering things like, does the website give me value? Is it easy to use? Is it pleasant to use? These are questions that run through the minds of visitors as they interact with our products. And they form the basis of their decision on whether to become a regular user. User experience design is all about striving to make them answer yes to all of those questions. How many of you remember MySpace? Do you guys remember MySpace? It came out about the same time as Facebook. They were both social media platforms. Do you guys remember the MySpace? Now, why is it, do you think, that Facebook won out over MySpace? What was the difference between the two? Yeah, that's it right there. Facebook was so much easier to use. Yep, you had a whole lot less options than you did on MySpace, but in the end, Facebook was so much simpler and easier to use that most of the people on MySpace switched over to Facebook, and that's what they used all the time. It all boils down to how well the user likes it, how easy it is to use, how convenient it is. So let's talk a little bit about user experience. User experience, or UX, is how a person feels when interfacing with a system. The system could be a website, a web application, or a desktop software. And in modern context, it's generally denoted by some form of human-computer interaction. Those who work on UX study and evaluate how users feel about a system, looking at such things as ease of use, perception of the value of the system, utility, efficiency in performing tasks, and so forth. UX designers also look at subsystems and processes within a system. For example, they might study the checkout process of an e-commerce website to see whether users find the process of buying products from the website easy and pleasant. Compared to many other disciplines, particularly web-based systems, UX is relatively new. And it is. UX is relatively new. It was all about UI, user interface, or UX, user experience. And when you have user interface as kind of the foundation for user experience, you can't have one without the other. Why is UX important? Nowadays, with so much emphasis on user-centered design, describing and justifying the importance of designing and enhancing the user experience seems almost unnecessary. We could simply say it's important because it deals with our users' needs. Enough said. And everyone would probably be satisfied with that. Before our clients understood the value of user-centered design, we made design decisions based on just two things: what we thought was awesome and what the client wanted to see. We built interactions based on what we thought worked. We designed for ourselves. The focus was on aesthetics in the brand, with little to no thought of how the people who would use the website would feel about it. There was no science behind what we did. We did it because the results looked good, because they were creative, and because that's what our client wanted. Absolutely 100% true. It's exactly what we used to do. We've had to change that. Because now, just like in print design, it's not so much about what the customer or the client wants. We have to consider the target market, right? Every single web page on the web has a target market. Every single web page that you design as a graphic designer will have a target market. And you have to know what that target market is. Because you can't design for them if you don't know who the market is. And the simplest form is you aren't designing for your client when you're making a website. You are designing for that target market. But this decade has witnessed a transformation of the web. Not only has it become more open, more convenient, more versatile, the web has at least 1.5 billion users globally in 2008. How many do you think it has now? Probably double that, right? At least double that. We all use it. Right now, there are many more cell phone users of the web than there are desktop users of the web. And websites have become so complex and feature-rich that to be effective, they must have great user experience design. Additionally, users have been accessing websites in an increasing number of ways. Mobile devices is the number one way websites are accessed right now. And vast landscape browsers, huge monitors. We kind of talked about this in week 1. Used to, you buy a desktop computer and it came with a small 15-inch monitor. Now you can go out and buy a desktop computer and they come with these 24-inch monitors. That's a big difference. And you have all kinds of different website connections, internet connections now, right? You've still got dial-up for those using it. You've got Wi-Fi, you've got satellite, you've got the T3. You can get internet through your cable now. And of course, you've got AT&T's where they're running their super fast internet connections. And it's through fiber wire. We've also become aware of the importance of accessibility. Universal access to our web-based products, not only for those with the special requirements, such as for screen readers and non-traditional input devices, but for those who don't have broadband connections or who have older mobile devices and so forth. With all these sweeping changes, the websites that have consistently stood out were the ones that were pleasant to use. The driving factor of how to build websites today has become the experience we want to give the people who will use the website. All about the target market. So what situations would benefit from UX design? Saying that all web systems would benefit from a solid evaluation and design of user experience is easy. Arguing against it is hard if you care about user-centered design at all. But we don't live in a perfect world, and we don't have unlimited resources. Thus, we must prioritize and identify the areas that stand out to gain the most from UX design. So, what stands to gain the most? Complex systems, right? My 401k website, complex system. It could stand to use some user experience. Startups, definitely startup businesses. Their websites should be extremely easy to use. That's how you're going to attract new customers and get customers away from the competitors. Projects with decent budgets and projects that with longer time frames, because it does take longer to really go in and study the UX design. Yeah, there's a lot of things that you'll do when you're designing just because they have become standards in web design, and those standards are part of the user experience, like your navigation bars and images, things like that. They're pretty standard. So you're going to do a lot of that off the bat, but you're going to, or could have the opportunity to work on some very large website designs. And therefore, it takes longer because you're really going to have to go in and check on user design, user experience in different parts of that website. I had the opportunity to help with the Baylor Healthcare website. Baylor Healthcare is the #1 hospital in Texas, and they have Baylor hospitals all over Texas. Huge, huge, enormous website. Not only did they have their external website for, patients and customers and just people checking out the hospital, you also had a portal where the patients could log in and see part of their medical reports and things of that nature. And then you had a login for the doctors, where the doctors could access different call lists and departments and things of that nature. We're talking a very, very complex website. And I was part of the user design, the user experience design on that website. And so you have to take all of this stuff and you break it down. and you spread it out, and you create test panels after test panels after test panels until you get everything reasonably easy to use. Is there a way to ever get 100% there? Well, yeah, the website didn't have to be done within 6 months or a year, maybe, but you're never going to be able to please every single person. The idea is to please the majority. The more complex the system, the more involved will the planning and architecture have to be for it. While investing in a full-blown multi-member UX study for a simple static website seems excessive, multifaceted websites, interaction-rich web application, and e-commerce websites stand to benefit a lot from UX design. Systems that involve a myriad of user tasks must be perceived as being valuable, pleasant, and efficient. Designers risk big losses in revenue by neglecting the user experience. How many of you shop on Amazon? You guys shop on Amazon? Not really. I am a big Amazon shopper. And I can guarantee you if Amazon's website was not as easy to use as it is, I never buy anything from it because it takes too long to find what I was looking for because they have so much. But I use Amazon a lot. And thankfully, it's very, very easy to use. But Amazon would not be as popular and as huge as it is. I mean, right now they're creating drones to start delivering their packages immediately. That's pretty awesome. And they wouldn't be near as big or able to do the things that they are now doing if it wasn't for the fact that their website has a great user experience. Startups and smaller companies generally do not have the resources to hire dedicated employees for this. For example, Basecamps and lean startup companies that build highly successful and robust web applications, including Basecamps and Highrise, rely on well-rounded individuals, people who can wear different hats. Why is this? Usually because the startup companies have a smaller budget. They're going to hire a web designer and not have the budget to specifically hire a UI designer and a UX designer. They're going to want that web designer to do it all. So you have to have that basic understanding. Projects with okay budgets. Smaller agencies that work for small and medium-sized businesses need to keep costs low for their customer base and prioritize deliverables in order to stay on the budget. The focus in these situations is more on the build process and less on the planning, research, and analysis. Projects with small budgets will be driven more by the launch of the final product. That doesn't mean that these projects wouldn't benefit from good UX. Of course they would. But in practice, small or medium-sized companies often do not feel compelled to invest resources in something that is not necessary for the launch of the site. And that is not always on projects that have just an okay budget. How many of you have ever visited a movie premiere website? A website that they've launched for the release of the new movie that's coming out. How many of you have ever visited one of those websites? Anybody? Did the website work perfectly? Was it easy to use? Yeah. How simple was it? Yeah, very simple. Why do you think that is? Well, they're a movie premiere. I mean, they have money, right? They made the movie. Movies cost tons of money to make. So, you know, the companies like Sony and Fox and all of those, they have plenty of money, right? But what do you think their budget is for websites for those movie premieres? Minimal. The budget for those websites is very minimal. Hence, the reason they are so simple. Projects with longer time frames. By simple logic, adding a cog to the transitional website production process will extend the timeline. Time must be allotted for user experience design. UX designers could, in theory, shorten timelines by taking on some of the tasks traditionally assigned to the web designers and developers, thus potentially saving time and cost in revision phases, but having addressed user issues. That's very true. Instead of the web designer deciding where the buttons are located, what color they're going to be for rollover and mouse down and active and things like that, well, it would save a whole lot of time if the UX designer just did those things versus the web designer doing them, because the web designer does it, and it's based all on how the website looks, because they're not thinking about user experience. They're thinking about the cosmetics of the website, how it looks. So then it goes to the UX designer to have the user experience checked. And the user designer sends it back to the web designer saying, no, the navigation bar isn't convenient enough for users, not going to be able to find it, or that color's not right, it's too bright, too dark, whatever. And so the web designer has to go back in, recode that, rechange all the CSS, and then send it back to the UX designer again. It would save a lot of time if the UX designer was just simply responsible for some of those basic things. Things to know about UX design. UX design is an amazing discipline, but it cannot or will not accomplish certain things. UX design is not one-size-fits-all link. User experience design won't work in every situation for every user, because as human beings, we are all different. And this is where it comes to where I said the idea is never to please all. It's to please the majority. What works for one person might have the opposite effect on another. And just as we can't design a user experience, we can't replicate the user experience from one website exactly to another website. User experience will be different between websites. A design must be tailored to the goals, values, production process, and products of its website. Now, there are some things that will transfer from one website to another, like where the navigation bars are located, things like that. We know we don't want to put a navigation bar at the bottom of the page because users can't find it. We always look at the top or the left side for that navigation bar. Can't be directly assessed with traditional metrics. You can't determine the effectiveness of user experience design based solely on statistics such as page views, bounce rates, and conversion rates. We can make assumptions, and we can ask users we can ask them to do things like a survey, a rating. We see that on websites all the time, right? Rate this website, or please take our short survey. We see that those kind of things all over the web. That's great, but it doesn't mean those answers are 100% accurate. It is not the best way to make sure that website is effective. The best way is just what I was talking about earlier. Develop a test panel. Give them specific tasks that you know your users are going to use that website to find answers to these specific questions. Have your test panel find those answers and have them time themselves on how long it takes. That will give you an excellent idea on how well your user experience is. User experience and usability have become synonymous, but these two fields are clearly distinct. UX addresses how a user feels when using a system, while usability is about the user friendliness and efficiency of the interface. So that means when you have your test panel, it's not always just so you want to know their thoughts too, not just how long it took them to do something. You want to know how easy it was for them to find. What they thought about the page they had to go to find it, what they thought about where the contact form was located, what they thought about the color of the text or the color of the headings on each page. You want to know their feelings. So you have to ask specific questions. And it's easiest to get their feelings out of them when you've asked them to do a task. And then you ask them about a specific page where they had to go to find that answer to that task. What do you think about the heading on that page? How easy was the text to read? Those sort of things that will kind of inadvertently get them to tell you what their feelings are for the website without just asking them, how'd you feel about the website? Because that's an open-ended question, guys. It's very open-ended and it's very subjective, especially when your friends and family are on that test panel. Ask them specific questions that will actually reveal to you how they actually feel about the website. Does that make sense? The W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, is the main international standards organization of the World Wide Web. The W3C has a set of standards to define website accessibility. The web is fundamentally designed to work for all people, whatever their hardware, software, language, culture, location, or physical or mental ability. When the web meets this goal, it is accessible to the people with a diverse range of hearing, movement, sight, and cognitive abilities. The impact of disability is radically changed on the web because the web removes barriers to communication and interactions that many people face in the physical world. However, when websites, web technology, or web tools are badly designed, they can create barriers that exclude people from using the web. Why? It is essential that the web be accessible in order to provide equal access and equal opportunity to people with diverse abilities. Indeed, the UN Convention on the Rights of a Person with Disability recognizes access to information and communicates technology, including the web, as a basic human right. Accessibility supports social inclusion for people with disabilities as well as others, such as older people, people in rural areas, and people in developing countries. There is also a strong business case for accessibility. Accessibility overlaps with other best practices such as mobile web design, device independence, multiple module interaction, usability, design for older users, and search engine optimization. Case study shows that accessible websites have better search results, reduced maintenance costs, and increased audience reach, among other benefits. Developing a web accessibility business case for your organization details the social, technical, financial, and legal benefits of web accessibility. Properly designed websites and web tools can be used by people with disabilities. However, currently many sites and tools are developed with accessibility barriers that make it difficult or impossible for some people to use them. Here are just a few examples: alternative text for images, keyboard input, transcripts for podcasts. YouTube just did something to improve their accessibility about 2 or 3 years ago now. They started doing something to improve their accessibility. You guys know what they did? With the help of Google Voice, YouTube has started including closed captioning. Because think about this. How many hearing impaired individuals are there in the world? A lot. And so they were missing an entire group of people. And YouTube is a very big access point, isn't it? I mean, not only do you get individual stuff, but you've got learning stuff and things like that you can find on YouTube. Except for they were excluding this big, huge group of people. Well, they remedied that with the help of Google Voice. And now you can pull up a video on YouTube and click the closed caption and turn on the captioning. Not all videos have been closed captioned at the moment, but most of them have. And Google Voice has been slowly going through and captioning all of them. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. It's not. I've turned on the closed captioning a few times on the videos, and it's not. Google Voice is not perfect. But it is better than nothing, especially when you're a hearing impaired individual. That was a huge step for YouTube and an even larger step for Google because they had developed something that websites could use to improve their accessibility. Alternative text for images. You guys did all of this on your websites last week. Alt text is the classic example. Images should include equivalent alternative text in the markup code. If alt text isn't provided for image, the image information is inaccessible. For example, to people who cannot see or use a screen reader that reads aloud the information on a page, including the alt text for visual images. When equivalent alt text is provided, the information is available to everyone, to people who are blind, as well as people who turned off images on their mobile phones to lower bandwidth charges, people in rural areas with low bandwidth who turned off images to speed downloads, and others. It's also available to technologies that cannot see the image, such as search engines. This is why I had you guys put in those lengthy descriptions. Number one reason, it improves your SEO a lot. It'd be simple to just go in and add 1 or 2 words to explain an image, right? Graduate image here. But how's that going to help your SEO? It's not. And so you get very descriptive because it's just another way to improve your SEO without putting in a million description that's a page long. Google's not going to search that. Those spider robots on search engines that gather all this information, they're reading the first couple of lines of your description and that's it. They are not going to read a book. They're not programmed to do that. But adding that extra stuff, using alt tags and things like that, well, guess what? They read all that. They're programmed to collect those alt tags. Keyboard input. Some people cannot use a mouse, including many older users with limited fine motor control. An accessible website does not rely on the mouse. It provides all functionality via a keyboard. Then people with disabilities can use assistive technologies that mimic the keyboard, such as speech input. How many of you realize that when you're on a website, normally you can go to your keyboard and hit your arrow keys, and it'll automatically flip through the navigation bar for you? If you just keep clicking that arrow key to the left, and it'll keep going through those buttons, and when you find the one you want, you can hit enter, and it's like a mouse click. Did you guys know that? Social media. Remember, use original unmodified logos and images. Generally, resized logos is the only modification allowed. Capitalize the brand name when acceptable. Maintain space around the brand logos and images. Normally, as graphic designers, when you're hired to build a company's website, guess what else they're going to ask you to do? They're going to ask you to build their social media account as well. Their Facebook page, their Twitter page, their LinkedIn page. And now you've got Snapchat, YouTube, Behance, all of that stuff. And of course, you need to link all that stuff to their website, right? It improves their SEO because they have some outside links. And it makes user experience even better for the customers that are using that website because they can go check out the company at a whole different outlet. They can look at their social media account. They can look at your portfolio that happens to be on it, Behance. So now let's talk about the effective web design principles. Those of you that were with me in DS248, we spent a lot of time on these. We're just going to kind of quickly go through these and hit on them just a little bit as a reminder. So if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to stop me and ask me about something in particular if you don't understand it. The design of your website is more important for conversation than you think. You can implement any conversation boosting tactic in the world, but if it looks like crap, it won't do you much good. Design is not just something designers do. Design is marketing. Design is your product and how it works. So you have to think about things like visual hierarchy, divine proportion, Hicks law, Fitts law, the rule of thirds, Gestalt design principles, white space and clean design, Occam's razor. These are all different types of web design and effects that you can use that will take your website from being all right to awesome with excellent user experience. Let's talk a little bit about visual hierarchy. Rank the circles in order of importance. Which one of these circles do you think is most important? Which one of these circles would you guys say was most important? Without knowing anything about these circles, you were easily able to rank them. Blue is the biggest, so it's got to be the most important. Visual hierarchy, by nature, as humans, we hold the things that are biggest as most important. It's just the way our brain works unless we know otherwise. But on just a visual sense, we tend to rank things from biggest to smallest. Certain parts of your website are more important than others. Form calls to action, value proportions, etc. And you want those to get more attention than less important parts. If your website menu has 10 items, are all of them equally important? Where do you want the user to click? Make important links more prominent. Hierarchy does not only come from size. Amazon makes the Add to Cart button, that call to action button, more prominent using color and shape. So it's not always just about size. You can do hierarchy by color. You can do hierarchy by font choice, by white space. There are a million different ways to create hierarchy, but every single website needs hierarchy. So how do you figure it out? How do you figure out what's most important and what's least important so that you can build your hierarchy correctly? Well, you start with the business objective. Rank elements on your website based on your business objective. If you don't have a specific goal, you can't know what to prioritize. What's the goal of the website? What's the company, or if you're making your own personal portfolio website, what is your ultimate goal? You have to be able to answer that question before you can create hierarchy. Otherwise, you don't truly know what's more important and what's not important. This is an example of the Williams-Sonoma's website. They want to sell outdoor cookware. Why is the visual hierarchy well done? Why would you say that the image is what they've ranked number one? It's the most important thing on this website. Why would you say that's the most important thing? What's the most important thing? Because it's visual. It's going to immediately get the user's attention, is it not? It's the most prominent thing on the page, and it's an image. Images speak 1,000 words, right? That's a good image. Makes me hungry. And they're selling outdoor cookware. So, yeah, they should have a very good visual, because that's going to get people's attention, get them looking at the product, and that is the goal of this website, to get people to buy stuff. So in order to do that, they have to get their attention. That's the kind of stuff you have to prioritize. How do you reach that goal first? Well, your first goal of any website is going to be to get the user's attention. You need to get them to do something. And in order to get them to do something, you have to have their attention. So you have to use something to get that attention. Whether it be text, an image, a graphic, so forth. Divine proportion, golden ratio, and Fibonacci sequence. You learned about both of these in DS 109. Here is a comment by Twitter's creative director. To anyone curious about the new Twitter proportions, know that we didn't leave these ratios to chance. This is, of course, only applies to the nearest versions of UI. If your browser window is wider, your details pane will expand to provide greater usability, throwing off these proportions. But the narrowest width shows where we started ratio-wise. Those of you that use Twitter on your cell phones noticed about a year ago, they changed it again about 3 months ago, but they didn't play with the ratios very much. But you noticed about a year and a half ago that the cell phone version of Twitter completely changed, and it became much easier to use. The usability of that website went way up compared to what it was like before using Twitter on your cell phone. Hicks' law says that with every additional choice increases the time required to make a decision. The more options a user has when using your website, the more difficult it will be to use, or may not be used at all. This is where I was talking about giving a user too many options means most likely they're not going to pick anything at all because they're not sure what they should do. In order to provide a more enjoyable experience, we need to eliminate choices. To make a better web design, the process of eliminating distracting options has to be continuous throughout the design process. Using filters to narrow down choices is one way to implement Hicks' law. How did this website successfully use Hicks' law? Same way that Amazon did. Which are some other ways to successfully use Hicks' law? Well, think about it. If you've been to the Amazon website, then you know it's very extensive. They have videos, they have music, they have books, they have groceries, they have shoes, women's clothing, gardening utensils. They have just about everything you can imagine. Can you imagine what their navigation bar would look like if they didn't have that nice little filter on the left-hand side of the screen? Their navigation would be so confusing, you'd never be able to find anything. That's where that filter come in handy at, because you can type in a product or type of products in the search, and then on the filter, you can narrow down your options. Same with this wine website. You could type in the type of wine you want. Or maybe you want a wine that's from Germany. So you could type Germany in at the top and then decide what flavor you want according to their filters on the side. You can narrow your options down until you get exactly what you want so you're not flipping through hundreds of bottles of wine. You've limited your choice down and maybe now you only have 10. Maybe you only have 50. That sort of thing. So it makes it easier for you to shop and find exactly what you want. That's what Hick's Law is all about. Fitts Law. Fitts Law stipulates that the time required to move to a target area, like clicking a button, is a function of the distance to the target and the size of the target. In other words, the bigger an object and the closer it is to us, the easier it is to use it. Spotify makes it easier to hit the play button than other buttons. Why? Because that button is just slightly larger than the fast forward and the rewind button. So it's easier to click. This definitely doesn't mean that bigger is always better. A button that takes up half the screen is not a good idea. Fitts Law is a binary logarithm. This means that the predicted results of the usability of an object runs along a curve, not a straight line. A tiny button will become much easier to click when given a 20% size increase, while a very large object will not share the same benefits and usability when given the same 20% boost. Sometimes making sure the entire button and not just the text inside of the button is all you need to make it easier to access, which means you may not need to change the size of the button itself. You just need to change the size of the text inside that button. The rule of thirds. It's a good idea to use an image in your design. A visual communicates your ideas much faster than any text and will get a lot more attention. In DS 109, you covered the rule of thirds. This is the 9-point grid that you worked with. When using photography, make sure that this is evident in the photos you choose for your website. The rule pertains to web design in general. For your portfolio site projects for this class, using photography should only be done if it is your own. Now let's talk about the Gestalt design principles. This is my favorite type of design. Gestalt is a German word meaning essence or shape of an entity's complete form. And a single definition may be one of the most important rules of design. More often than not, designers tend to focus on the web design's details rather than the overall look. Take a look at this image. What do you see first? What's the first thing you notice about this image? For most people, they usually notice the elderly couple. Sometimes it's the chalice in between them. But if you look closer, you start to notice the other little things, like the lady in the doorway that makes up the man's ear, or the person playing the guitar that makes up his face, or the person with the stuff on her head on the other side that makes up the older lady's face. These are basically designs within designs within designs, a bunch of small designs that create one big design. That is an awesome ability. What's the difference between these two images? They look basically the same, but there is some minor differences. What's the first thing you notice as being different? The bird is facing two different directions, isn't it? It's different, definitely different. And the perspective is a little different. Now, we could sit here and get real complicated. You've got 2 bricks here, 1 brick here. How many of you, when you were looking at this picture, noticed this girl's face right here? It appears in both images, but that is a girl's face. And then, of course, you've got the lady that makes up his ear. And then the top of his shirt, or the collar of his shirt. Then, of course, you've got the man here that makes up eyes, nose, mouth, and on down into the beard. That is Gestalt design. Applying the Gestalt principle to the web design workflow, the design will look the same until you've changed the structural Gestalt. You will be surprised at how many designers make the mistake and wonder why the client still hates a design or feels nothing has been changed or added, even though they've worked tirelessly on improving the individual elements. Why? Because they usually go back and they change the font, they change the color, but they never actually change the structure itself, meaning moving the image to a different location, moving around the navigation bar or the logo or that sort of thing. They never actually change the actual structure. They just change things within the structure. But what's really wrong with the overall design is the structure itself. Not the color they were using or the font they were using. It was the structure itself. That's why we use things like wireframes. That's why we make those. That way we can actually look at the actual structure without all the color images and font. We can see the actual specific structure. Here's some examples of some wireframes. You can see the wireframe over here on the right, and then the finished design on the left. Usually sticking to safe and general square-like design like the 4 bottom layouts from the previous example will result in an ordinary design, nothing very creative. Try to always experiment with the containing shell of your design. When your wireframe is locked down, then you can start moving into your colors and your font and your images and deciding what will fit there. That way, when it's finished, you have an awesome structure filled with awesome content. Think of your design as a chocolate-covered peanut. If you start with the peanut from the inside out, the outer layer, which everyone sees, will always depend on the peanut shape, and you will have little control over the results. However, if you treat your design like a chocolate egg, working on the outer layer first, in the shape it has the outer layer first, and shape it as you desire, fitting your inner content to match the shell, then it really doesn't matter what you fill it with. The design will always be the egg shape that you intended it to be. Let's talk a little bit about white space in clean design. White space, also called negative space, is the portion of a page left empty. It is the space between graphics, margins, gutters, space between columns, space between lines of type or visuals. And I don't know if you guys have noticed or not, but the new trend in web design is plenty of white space. The new trend is very crisp and clean websites. That requires a lot more white space than we have seen on the web in past years. Enough white space makes a website look clean. While clean design is crucial to communicating a clear message, it does not mean less content. To make a clean design, you have to know how to communicate clearly by using white space wisely. This is a great example of a website that uses white space wisely. They're using white space to create some hierarchy, to create different sections. This is a perfect example of the new web design trend. It's very clean, very crisp, very organized. Why has this become the new trend? Well, because of responsiveness. It's a lot easier to make a website that has plenty of website and is clean and organized, responsive, versus a website that is not. It's a lot harder to make a website that's kind of chaotic, responsive, than it is to take a website from something that's very clean and structured and turning it responsive. It becomes very easy. Occam's razor is a principle urging one to select among competing hypotheses that make the fewest assumptions and offer the simplest explanation of the effect. That, in a nutshell, means the simplest solution is usually the best. For example, this was the whole page before Occam's razor was applied to it. Whoops. There's a lot of information there. A lot to look through just for a home page. Can you imagine what their other pages must look like if their home page looks like this? After Occam's razor was applied, meaning they took everything off that was not important to that home page, they just took it away, put it on a different page, somewhere where it was important to that page. And they simplified this home page. Looks much more inviting, doesn't it? Not all that text to read through, not all those different options and things like that. It looks a lot cleaner, a lot more inviting. This probably pertains mostly to your home page. As we saw in the previous example, too much on the home page can result in confusion and not immediately finding the information that your visitor is looking for or getting the results you are looking for. Simple, minimal design does not automatically mean the design works or is effective, but simple is usually better than the opposite. Hence, we should strive to simplify. When you need to understand what's coming down the road in order to correctly do what is required this week. So we're going to talk a little bit about position and placement. Placement and position is one of the most important considerations designers do, whether it is for print or web. With web design, more comes into play with this because of the mnemonic value. Anybody know what mnemonic value is? Mnemonic value is a noun, a device such as a pattern of letters, ideas, or associations that assist in remembering something. As an adjective, aiding or designed to aid the memory. We use this so we can aid our users to easily navigate and quickly understand our content. That's why we put things in certain places on a website. It's become a principle because of mnemonic value. That's where users expect it to be, because that's where it's always been. Changing that can be very confusing. How many of you can remember the first time you seen a hamburger icon on your cell phone on a website? You remember feeling a little confused, wondering what the heck that button was, and wondering where the navigation went? So finally you clicked on it just to see what happened, and oh, it's the navigation bar. That's cool. I remember the first time I seen the hamburger icon, and I was very much like, what the heck is this? But I'm one of those people that, has to poke buttons. So that was the first thing I did, was clicked on it to see what happened, and it has the navigation bar. I get it. That's cool. Great tool. When you're starting a new design, no matter what your design methodology is, you start with a blank page. There is nothing on the web page. So the first thing that you'll do is put something on the page. Do you think about the placement of those elements, or you just throw them on the page willy-nilly? Good designers don't allow the position and placement of the design to occur randomly. You always have a plan. You always need to be thinking about, is there somewhere that users are going to expect to see this? Is there somewhere that it's most important that this be the most important thing on the page? This be the least important thing on the page? You always have to consider those type of things. Logo placement. Placement of your logo on your site should support your branding on the website, but not overwhelm it. What are the most common placements that you see on a site where the logo is placed? On a website, where are the most common places you see the logo? Where do you normally find the logo for that website at? Yes, at the top. It might be on the right, left, or center, but it's always at the top, right? That's where we expect to see it. So if you're building a website, should you put the logo at the bottom? Nope, it's going to confuse your users if the website's logo is at the bottom of the page, isn't it? They're going to be wondering what the heck's going on. Because that's not what they're used to. Navigation, same thing. Many studies have been done just on this subject. In Western cultures, people read from top to bottom and left to right. It then only makes sense to place your navigation at the top or left of your page. That's where we expect to see it, and that's exactly where we're going to find it when our eyes are scanning that web page for the first time, right? So if we hide that navigation from users, they're not staying on that page long because they think something's wrong with it. You have to consider all of those things, guys. So how do elements relate to your page goals? Knowing your goals and the goals of your page are key to placement. That is why ads are found in similar places on one page. If the goal is to get people to click on them or notice them, then placing them in locations where historically people look and click helps them to meet their goals. In some ways, this appears to be the most obvious part of the design. After all, if you already have a logo in the upper left, you're not going to place content on top of it. But you also need to think about the context of your positions. Placing an ad block in the middle of a text block implies a sense of connection between the two elements. Placing a horizontal line after a headline or byline can create a sense of disconnect between the title or byline and content. Perfect example of this. How many of you guys have taken plenty of classes now that you probably had to use mock-ups in several classes. How many of you have found a mock-up to use for your design and have gone to download it, and you click the first little download button that's really easy to see and takes you to another page, and then suddenly there's more than one download option. There's one on the right, maybe one at the top, and then there's a fairly small link down towards the bottom that says download to. Have you been to a page like that yet? They're quite lots of times, yes, and you're kind of guessing on which one of those you click, because two of them are going to take you to an outside website that want you to download a downloader to make things quicker. Normally, it's that little bitty link at the bottom that says download. That's the one you really need to click. But that is the perfect example of placing things in certain positions Well, make users think that's where they should click. Because the first time you went to one of those websites, did you click on the wrong button? Yeah, I did too. First time I ever went to one, I clicked on the wrong button also. Why? Because, well, I expected the down. It looked like it looked like the most important thing. It said to click here. That's what I did. But it just took me to a third-party website. Now, how many people think accidentally download that thing and that's the only way they can download what they want? And you end up with viruses and Trojans and worms and malware and all that kind of stuff. All because that element on that web page looked like the most important, so you were sure that's where you needed to click. In reality, it wasn't. So you always had to be paying attention. But that's a perfect example of what it's talking about right here. Don't design like that. We all hate it. It's frustrating. When I have to download one of those, I get irritated every time I have to go to one of those pages to download a mock-up. So, why couldn't they just fix this and get rid of that? Put it over on the right, out of the way, so I can download what I need. If I want that, then I'll go find that. But that's not the way they do it. I'm sure they have their reasons. They probably get a lot of kickback from that third-party site. But as far as user experience goes, it's horrible. Where you place your elements can make a difference. As they say in real estate, there are 3 important rules: location, location, location. If the Mona Lisa were stored in your aunt's garage, it wouldn't have near the effect as it does hanging in the museum, right? It's going to look totally different. As an example, totally different. You never believe that that painting was real if you saw it hanging in somebody's garage, would you? Excuse me, guys. Variety. Variety is the spice of life. One of the easiest design techniques is to center elements on the page. And many beginning designers start with that as their goal. All their design elements start in the middle, usually horizontal, but sometimes vertically as well. Centering appeals to many people because it's easy. You know you've done it right because half the page elements are on one side of the screen and the other half is on the other. Remember the golden sections. But centering is boring. Centering things makes them look very flat on the screen, and there's nothing for your eye to catch and hang on to. Centering is very rare in nature. In fact, even things that appear to be centered or symmetrical, like leaves, have many small imperfections that lead the eye. Use the principles of Gestalt to create a variety and interest on your page. Find the points of interest on your page. Points of interest are the focal points of a design, the place where your eye is drawn to. By changing the spacing around those points of interest, you can affect how those items are viewed on the page. For example, an image might be the focal point of your web page. You could choose to center the image on the page, but that's boring and flat. Instead, look at other elements on the page and change the margins around your image to create a design that heightens the interest of that image. You can see some great examples of this at templatemonsters.com. If you're looking for some inspiration, they have some great templates on templatemonster.com. And it will help you come up with some ideas of your own. It will show you the latest trends, the latest interactive design tools, and things they're doing with buttons and things like that, animation to make websites interactive. You can get some great information there and kind of do a little bit of research on things that you should include on the website you're building this week. Now that we have gone over placing and positioning our elements, let's do a quick review and discuss some other perimeters that may be needed when we dive into your wireframing for your project this week. You should all start with a wireframe. It makes things much easier. What should show on all pages? Your logo and tagline, your navigation, your footer content, just like the website you built for weeks 1 and 2. You need to think about things like points of interest, variety, the gestalt, hierarchy, composition. Any questions over those principles that we just went over, guys? No? Okay, let's take a look at our instructions for this week. Come on, Zoom. Come on. Your instructions this week. For this assignment, you will be designing the interface for your portfolio. There will be a minimum of 4 pages on your website portfolio: home, about, portfolio, and contact. We will be using Photoshop or Illustrator to create our website portfolio mock-up. Part 2. Let's go over part 1. The second part has to do with redesigning the interface of your portfolio that you created in DS241. There will be a minimum of 4 pages, as we just talked about, and you're going to redesign it, make it better. So part 1, using Word. Explain the changes you would like to create to your website portfolio you created in DS241. If you have not taken this course, you will discuss the 4 changes or additions you will add to your current portfolio website. By now, you all should have taken DS241. If you have not taken DS241, please send me an email. Explain why you will or won't change something on your website based on the UI. Now, guys, if you want to get creative with this, instead of writing a paper, you can. If you want to open Illustrator and make me a table and talk about your homepage, put the stuff on it and make little categories for changes to design style. If you're going to change the design style, put an X there and then tell me what you're going to do to it or why you're changing it. If you want to get creative instead of making an actual paper, absolutely go for it. You're designers after all, so it may be easier on your thought process to make something more like a table or infographic type thing than simply writing a paper. Totally up to you how you do that. If you do write a paper, it needs to be they need to be at least 50 words each, a total of 200 words. That's 50 words per page. Basically, is how that breaks down to. And you're just going to tell me about the changes to the design style, the changes to the layout concept, color changes, portfolio graphic changes, additional Muse features you would like to add, a plugin you will select to use. You're going to tell me about all of those things for every single page of the website. So your home page, your about page, your portfolio page, and your contact page. Part 2, using Photoshop or Illustrator, you will redesign your layout concept. In Photoshop or Illustrator, you're going to create the UI of your portfolio page, your home page, your about page, your portfolio page, your contact. Consider choosing a different color scheme. Check out Adobe Color to create a place to is a great place to find color schemes. Include your professional logo. Create or locate social media icons. You will need to use at least 2 social media icons. You will be graded on the following directions: originality, creativity, user usability and uniqueness to your style and layout. Export your design into multi-page PDF for the design of your home page, your about page, your portfolio page, and your contact page. So you have to mock up all 4 pages. You will not need to do the following. You do not have to add portfolio pieces to your portfolio page. You can do that in Muse next week. And you do not need to create the form. You can do that with Muse next week. Just draw a box where that stuff is going to be as a placeholder, just so I know where it's going to be located on the page. Now, those of you that had me for DS241, your website already includes a lot of these advanced techniques because I introduced you guys to them and a lot of you use them. So you may not be changing a whole lot. You will probably be more focused on adding to your SEO, the content of your page itself, mocking up your actual design pieces instead of showing the flat designs. Maybe changing your color scheme. Most of you will be changing out your actual logo because in DS241 you didn't have a logo, so you just had your name typed at the top. By now you've taken a class where you had to develop your logo, and so you can replace it. Those of you that did not have me may be doing a lot of other changes because you didn't know these advanced techniques yet that I had taught in my class. So you need to talk about things like, how are you going to utilize tab boxes? Is there a place on your website that you can use a tab box, that it would be easier for the users? Or an accordion box? All of you should already have a slideshow on your portfolio website from DS241. So open those files and take a look at them. This is my website. Now, the 3 programs I use to develop websites are Sublime, Dreamweaver, and Muse. My website is interactive. It does all kinds of stuff. It will do all kinds of stuff when you move over this picture. Now, what program do you think I designed this actual website in? I designed this website using Muse, guys. And it has some advanced stuff on it. My contact page utilizes the accordion. Phone number, my location, my privacy policy. I used an accordion panel to organize all of that. And of course, I have a simple contact form. And I used the Google Map. It's a widget. That's nothing more than it's simple, but it uses a lot of advanced techniques because I used a lot of animation and interactivity type stuff. That's the kind of things you're going to do to your website. You're going to take them from that basic design that you did in DS248 and you're going to improve it. Even those of you that had me for DS248, you've learned a lot since then. You've learned a lot about typography and things like that that we didn't do a lot of emphasis on in that class. Improve your website. Here's an opportunity before a lot of you get ready to graduate to start really working on your website. Definitely on your portfolio pages, guys. Mock them up. If you've got business card examples or trifolds or flyers, things like that, mock them up. They are going to look 100 times better mocked up than just a simple flat design. You give them that real feel. You draw more attention to them. put logos on coffee mugs or pins or things like that just to make them stand out. That is the assignment. The assessment. For the assessment, you will revise your Muse portfolio to create one if you do not have your Muse file from DS248. If you did not keep that Muse file, you will be starting from scratch. Those of you that kept your design files will just be going in and editing that stuff, moving things around, making it look better, changing fonts, that colors, that sort of thing. So you're going to revise the interface design based on your Photoshop or Illustrator mockup design. Create or revise your menu to make it interactive. Include effects for normal, rollover, mouse down, and active. Create links between your pages. If you use the widget menu bar, it's automatically going to do this. You're going to import your logo and hyperlink it to your home page. Same thing you did for the website you created weeks 1 and 2. I showed you guys how to link the logo to your home page. Import your social media icons and hyperlink them to your social media accounts, like LinkedIn or YouTube. So you're just going to go in, guys, basically, if you're being given a gift, look at it that way, because you're being given some essential time to improve the website you started in DS241. And that was your own personal portfolio website. It's very important for once you graduate, guys. Because having that website is going to be the one thing that makes you stand out as a designer. It's going to be the one thing that makes you ready to start taking on freelance customers. And this website was developed in Muse. I used Muse for the entire thing. Now, my company website was not developed in Muse. I used Dreamweaver. This website is much more complicated than my personal portfolio website. There's a lot more to it. And that's normally how it works for me. If I have a simple website design, I'll do it in Muse. But if I have something that's a little more complicated, I am going to use Sublime, Dreamweaver, or Visual Studios, depending on the website. In this case, I use Dreamweaver on this one. No, I take that back. I used a combination of Dreamweaver and Visual Studios. Most of this I did in Dreamweaver, though. But the idea this week is to take that website you built in DS241 and improve it, make it better. Some of you, that means you're going to have to change the structure altogether because you've learned a lot between that class and this class. And that's a good thing because that means your page is going to be that much better when you're done with this class. And this is DS305. So everyone in this class, you're getting pretty close to graduation by now. You're kind of at the end of your journey here. Not completely at the end, but you're on that home stretch. So it's time to work on this website. It's time to make sure that it's good. It's really good. So it's going to be ready when you graduate. You guys have any questions? So be excited, guys. You're working on your own portfolio website this week. Be creative. Think outside the box a little bit because this is all about you. And that means your website should reflect who you are as a designer. So be creative. Think outside the box a little bit. Come up with something that's interactive. That shows off your skills. Not just as a web designer. Keep that in mind. You're not just showing off those skills. You are showing off your print design skills on that portfolio page. because that's where you're going to show your logos and your business cards and your letterhead and your brochures and things like that. Make sure you mock them up because they will look so much better if they're mocked up. And just as a reminder, I will be in the SSC on Thursday and Friday. On Thursdays from 8 to 11 p.m. Mountain Time, and on Friday from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. Mountain Time. So if you're having trouble, not sure if something looks right, come in and let me check it out. Or if you're having a hard time coming up with an idea, come in and let's talk about it. Check out monstertemplates.com, guys. There is a lot of inspiration to be had there. They have some great web designs. No, that doesn't mean you can copy them, but you can use them for inspiration. Oops. Oh, it's Template Monster. I always get that wrong. Template Monster. You can go in here and look at their templates. And of course, you're doing portfolio. So you can search that. And it will pull up portfolio websites and show you the different kind of things that are going on, different trends that are happening right now. One came up from graphic design. Let's see if I had an ER on it. 51 came up for graphic designer. So you get all kinds of stuff in here that you could work with and get inspiration from. And you can see, if you click on them or hover over them, you can click on live demo. And it will take you to these websites and show you what's happening. And downloading some third-party widgets will make your images do exactly what's happening right here. You just have to find the third-party widgets. But you can get all kinds of inspiration and kind of do your own thing. So don't be afraid if you're having a hard time, if you're stuck, not sure what to do. Check these websites out, this Templates Monster, and look at the trends. Get some inspiration so that you know what to do to your website. Got some animation with those words. You guys had learned how to do that last week. And you can go through this website. It's a live demo. So you can flip through pages and things like that. And look at what's going on. This is a great place for inspiration when you're designing websites. And you need something different than the norm, than just a standard design. So use Template Monster and just get some ideas. All right, guys, if you don't have any questions, then we will call it an evening. And if you guys need help, just let me know. On Template Monster, you can also see the different responsiveness and how to design each one of those pages. What they've done that will help give you an idea of the things you should be doing for your page when you make it cell phone size or when you make it tablet size. guys, then we will call it an evening if you don't have any questions, and I will see you guys next week.